Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Benji, and I'm here to help you master your emotions with self-love and shadow work. As I always say, feelings come first. So, today's topic is about why a lot of us feel like we haven't had necessarily a lot of friends throughout throughout our lives. Um, why, even if we've had friends, we don't necessarily feel connected to them in the same way that, we look at other people as having friends and then, having those like besties kind of things and people that would stick up for you. This came from a question in my Facebook group. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're not in the Facebook group, come check it out. It's called Self Love and Shadow Work Modern Awakenings. You can find us there. So let me go ahead and read the question exactly as it was, and then we're going to dive into this. I think this is going to be a very interesting topic. So let's see. The person writes, "It occurred to me today that I am a total loner. Except for my husband, I have no friends. I have acquaintances, people I work with, but no real friends. So I went back in my life and tried to remember if I ever did. My best friend as a child, I totally recall feeling less than around her. I'm talking 6 years old. I've had friends since, but none that lasted or were even that close. Could this be a result of childhood trauma so far back that I can't even remember it?" All right, so I think that's an awesome question. Firstly, one that a lot of us can relate to, as well as just a really well worded question, because it brings up a lot of topics. So there are a lot of things to kind of touch on here. I'm going to do my best to get through a lot of them, and I'm going to do my best to keep this under an hour. We'll see how things go. Okay, so myself, I definitely resonate with this statement, about having been a loner my whole life kind of thing, and never really having friends, at least in the way that others did. I can't really say that I never had friends. That's really not the case. I wouldn't really be being honest if I said I never had friends, and it would do a disservice and a disrespect to basically like the three people in my life right now that I could call friends, even though none of them live near me or, most like at least two of them, we don't really resonate. We're not really on the same level. But those are the three people that like they have been there for me kind of thing in my life. And I love them. Don't, if any of them happen to be watching, don't get me wrong. I don't just consider you a friend because you were there for me. I love you. And you happen to have been there for me, which is why I include you in this category of actual friends as opposed to people who, passed through my life. So I can't necessarily say that I never had friends, but I can very much say that I never felt connected to other people in the way that other people seem to be. Other people seem to have like real close friends, and then people that stick with them throughout the span of their lives, and people that they party with and celebrate with, and like someone that like if you have really big news you're going to call them up right now. And I just I don't know, I don't necessarily have anyone like that, and I don't think I ever did. um I never felt a strong connection to people, and well, even that's not entirely true, because I think what really happened for me was I felt a connection to a lot of people, but I learned over my lifetime that they didn't necessarily feel the same connection. And I think it was because I was looking for or expecting a deeper connection than they were willing to get to. Now, we're going to talk about why this all is, the actual explanation of what it is that's different between us and them kind of thing that creates that dichotomy. But I want to start off. There's actually a little story from when I was, I don't know, it must have been 5, 6 years, 5, 6, 7, something like that. When I graduated from kindergarten, I finished kindergarten, went on to grade one. I remember in my school, in kindergarten, we used to have recess in our classroom. We didn't go outside. And grade one is the first time we got to have recess outside. So this was the first time that we got to, play in this playground setting with our peers. And I remember the very first time, so it was, day one of school and first recess and first go, and I went to the playground. I went up to the top of the slide, and I remember as I was about to go down, I stopped and I had to think of what does having fun look like? Like I had to pretend to be a human child kind of thing. Like I didn't understand this whole thing. Like I didn't understand slides. Not like I didn't understand what to do with them. I didn't understand why people found this fun. I didn't get it. But, it's my first day of recess, my first day of school. Like, I've got to pretend to be like everyone else. So, as I was going down the slide, I put up my hands and went, wee! But in my head, I actively chose to do it. Like, I wasn't actually having fun and like, wee! Like, from the heart. It was, okay, how do I convince all of these people that I'm one of them kind of thing? Okay, I'll put my hands up and go, wee, because I think that that's what having fun looks like. So, right from the very beginning, I felt different. I felt a disconnection. So, I'm going to circle back around to all that to talk about the possible explanations, or at least my interpretation of why that all is. But before I get into that, I want to address the last part of her question, which is, was this potentially due to childhood trauma so far back that I can't forget? Now, it's possible. It might be that this happened because of childhood trauma and something like that's stuck in your mind. And whether like I want to give a different explanation. And with that different explanation that I'm going to give, it is also still true that this will be tied into childhood trauma. The two are not separate from each other, but I think that the viewpoint of this is coming from my childhood trauma is not a helpful way of looking at this. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that all of our issues, at the psychological level, started from some trauma in some way. It's good for us to recognize that and understand how that works psychologically so that we can be open to the understandings of undoing our old patterns. It definitely helps us recognize that we have been programmed throughout our lives and all that. And you might realize at a certain point the specific trauma that set this into place. But I don't think, like I said, that that's a helpful way of looking at it because, for one thing, if you look at it in terms of, well, this is caused by childhood trauma, then you're going to spend your days searching for that childhood trauma, which is just not going to be very effective because let's say that this happened as a result of childhood trauma, then it happened as a result of an emotional defense mechanism. Something hurt you, and so you developed this defense mechanism in order to avoid feeling that pain in the moment and in order to avoid having to encounter that same scenario again in the future. Now, an intellectual understanding of where this came from isn't really going to be helpful or effective until we build the right muscles and learn the right tools and skills to start undoing that fear-based defense mechanism in the first place. An intellectual understanding is really only going to keep us going in circles more because, like I said, what's really going on here is this emotional defense mechanism. Your heart was in pain and it shut itself off. Now, yes, it shut itself off for a reason, for something that happened up there, but that's not really the issue. This is the issue right here. And, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people go around in circles like with this stuff for years is because some of them have found their traumas. We get where it came from. But knowing that doesn't actually help us get rid of it because the problem is not the memory and the trauma that happened. The problem is the emotions that never got resolved and released in that moment. So our goal is to learn how to slowly start releasing this stuff bit by bit. And as we do that, then our brain can relax and open up, and it will show us these revelations about, like, oh, right, that's when it happened in the first place. So I don't think that searching for your childhood trauma is a very effective way of going about this. And so I don't think that thinking about this in terms of, well, this was caused by childhood trauma is the most effective way of going about it. We need to understand that, yeah, this likely sparked from childhood trauma, but let's go about this in a different way. Let's do the healing in a different way, um, because it doesn't matter where exactly it came from. And as you might come to understand through this video, as I start giving my secondary explanation, I believe that this secondary, it's going to like, I'm going to give the sort of higher dimensional, the spiritual, the soul level explanation of why we feel different and why we have trouble connecting with these people. And I believe that that soul level explanation is the overarching truth to the childhood trauma that may or may not have happened. That the childhood trauma that happened is a reflection of the soul level truth. You know, the thing that happened to you in this world is the instance that triggered this soul level disconnection. Like, that soul level disconnection was already in you, and it was going to be triggered at one point or another. And you can track it down to that first time in your life where it happened. But that was just a trigger. This thing existed inside of you, this difference, this longing, this heart yearning for connection that you can't seem to find with other people, and that you see everyone else has. That was inside of us this whole time. And it was just waiting to be triggered. Now, just one quick kind of side note with that, like, the more and more that I dive into this work, the more I realize, and I don't just mean my own shadow work, but I mean teaching. The more that I dive into this work, the more that I realize that, how can I put this? I am me. This is who I am. This is who I have always been. This is who I came here to be. And my heart and my soul always knew. Really. It's weird to say. I always knew that I was here to do this. Not this specifically. I didn't know about shadow work. I didn't know that I was here to teach about emotions and emotional wellness. I knew that I was here to teach about life. I did. And I'm going to get into some more aspects about this, but it was very hard for me to understand and accept that. And as I went through my life and as I went through my awakening and came into this version of myself, I saw more and more and more how that version of me that I knew was inside this whole time, but that I put aside because it didn't really make a lot of sense from within a human perspective, the more that I saw that, like, this has always been there. This has always been me, and I was always meant to go down this path. And you know, if you're a fan of, you know, time travel stories in movies and in films, you know, they talk often about how the universe course corrects. You know, you can throw a pebble into the river, but the river's still going to go in the same direction. You know, no matter how many little kind of changes you try to make to it, the river is always going to course correct. It's always going to get back on track. And I very, very much believe now, through my own experience, through my own life, that this is true for our lives. You know, there's only so much that we can divert from the path that we are meant to be on. And you can look at that from two different perspectives. Either from the soul level perspective of, I'm destined to do this, or from the heart and psychology perspective of, like, I'm just kind of wired that way. And these internal feelings that I have were bound to get triggered one way or another by these people in our lives. And, you know, if it didn't happen, like, you might remember that one time in, you know, in kindergarten where you first experienced that trauma of being rejected and therefore you didn't have friends, kind of thing. But if it didn't happen that day in kindergarten, then it would have happened 6 months later in kindergarten, or a year later in grade one, or it would have happened 2 years later in grade three, because you carried this inside of you, this difference, this distinction of the way that you look at life versus the way that other people look at life, or how you interact with people, or how you want to interact with people versus the way that other people do. So that was at the core of who you are, and nothing could have changed that. And therefore, yes, we can find some childhood trauma, which was the first instance of this thing in your life. But does that necessarily mean that, like, that's where it came from? And once you remember that childhood trauma, that this is all going to make sense and go away, kind of thing? It's not quite that simple. Okay, so let me talk a bit about this kind of soul level perspective of why we feel different. Now, I am going to touch on some kind of spiritual notions. I'm talking about this from the soul level, from the perspective that we are all souls incarnated in bodies right now, here for various purposes, mainly to learn and grow and evolve our own consciousness. Some of us who are here as light workers and star seeds. Don't overread into those terms. I resonate with those terms. I believe in those terms. But I also believe that it's important not to over romanticize those terms. Like, let's not dig our identity too deep into those things. I like to use these terms more as an expression of how I live my life. That, like, even if I'm wrong about everything at the spiritual level, even if I'm not actually a soul embodied in a human body right now, I'm still a light worker, because that's how I choose to live my life, and that's how I live every single day. I I I focus on being of service to this world. So it's from that perspective, that soul level perspective, that I'm gonna talk about this. So, like I said, I noticed for myself that this stuff was always inside of me. I was always moving in this direction. I always felt a little bit different. Even from that first time in kindergarten when I was going down that slide, I felt like I didn't connect with what human social life really was. And what I've come to believe and sort of wrap my head around is that it's hard for me to find a way to say this without trying to sound like I'm talking myself up, or I'm ego or arrogant, and whatever. There's a whole side note of, it's so hard to talk about these things without sounding that way, when I'm really just talking about observations. That I very much feel as if we are older souls, to put it as simply as possible. That a lot of people, come into this world, and as a younger soul kind of thing, they're much more ready and willing to just play the game that's given to them. They're at a certain level in their soul's evolution. And we are at a higher level in our soul's evolution. Now, let me pause for a minute. That does absolutely not mean for a moment that we're better than them. It absolutely does not mean that we're smarter than them, wiser than them, anything else. We are all the same at the end of the day. Someone who is in grade 6 is not wiser and smarter and better than someone who's in grade 1. They just started their journey earlier. That's all there is to it. So there's nothing to be proud or arrogant about in terms of this. It's just, okay, like, starting to recognize who I am and the way that I approach life and approach relationships and approach education, just approach everything, is different from other people around me. And a phrase that I found very helpful for myself, popped into my head one day while I was going through my shadow work, that was extremely important for me to recognize, especially because of the circumstances of my awakening, which we can get into in another video, was the most harmful thing that I ever did to myself was not allowing myself to believe that I was different. See, I always had this inside of me. I always felt different. I always looked at things differently. I always connected with things differently. I had a completely different perspective and a completely different, let's say, flow and frequency, just just a different perspective on my life that didn't make a lot of sense, from within a human perspective. Like I said, like I knew that this stuff was in me my whole life, but until I remembered that I am a multidimensional soul trapped in a human's body, that didn't make any sense. So I I had to push it aside. I kept on, part of me, my heart kept on trying to tell me, like, Benji, you're here for a reason. Benji, you have something. Benji, you need to share this stuff. Benji, you need to, like, you're here for all of these reasons. But the human side of me, like, well, that's just arrogance, right? That's just ego. That's just insanity. How dare you think of yourself in that way, Benji? And, the reason I developed those thoughts was because other people would kind of say those things or treat me that way, or maybe not so directly, but I would try to express the wisdom that I had. But because I was young and because I didn't know how to express myself yet, and because I was still dealing with my own emotional wounds, um, they weren't able to hear me, they weren't able to believe me, they weren't able to acknowledge me. So I spent my whole life desperately seeking validation about these things that I knew were inside of me, and not able to get validation from anyone around me because, I mean, they couldn't understand what I felt inside, and I was not yet at a place of enough emotional and intellectual mastery to properly sit in my own strength and convey these messages to them in a way that, like, believe me or not, you're going to listen to me. You're at least going to hear me. It's impossible not to. So I struggled to come to terms with my own identity, which led me to this constant cycle where I would constantly try to fit in with people and give myself shit for not being able to fit in and all those sort of things and trying to connect with people. And not feeling good about that. Like, why I didn't feel good about myself and I didn't feel comfortable in these scenarios. I was, wondering to myself, why can't I be like everyone else? Why can't I form these connections? I remember plenty of times, like countless times, um, feeling like I was, David Attenborough watching a documentary on humans at times, like especially, in my teens and early 20s and, the bars and club scenes. I could hear that like British voice in my head, when I'm sitting at a bar and watching all these people do their things, being like, watch as the human male approaches a human female at the bar. He pecks up his chest and orders a drink to try and coax the female into joining him for a conversation and into inebriating her for the purposes, like, it just I felt like I was on the outside looking in. And a lot of times I wanted to be on the inside. So I tried to convince myself, I tried to be that, but I just couldn't. I couldn't put aside my perspective, my sights, and there were some times in my life where I got a little more lost in the 3D game and, I was maybe playing that a little more, but I never really played it well, you know? Um, I was always speaking differently, looking at things differently, and just trying to interact differently. And, one note on that, by the way, um, I think that many of you, if you truly look inside and, analyze your lives, you might find, like me, that this not having friends thing was as much your decision as it was other people's. You know, because we haven't had friends throughout this journey a lot, or because we haven't had people that truly understand us, we often look at the times that we were rejected. And that's very true. I was rejected plenty of times. I can remember, like, if I was to think of, I mean, it's definitely not my earliest trauma around it, but one of the earlier ones that I can actually remember was in elementary school. I had three really close friends. Now, in hindsight, I recognize that they never understood me. I never understood them. We were never really on the same page. But I did have three people that I called my best friends. And then the second we got to high school, we went from the same elementary to the same high school. And it's like basically like 90% of people from my elementary school went to this high school, but then people from other schools came in also. And as soon as that happened, they stopped talking to me. And anyway, so that's sort of where the first trauma comes from, let's say. um, but if you look deep down, I think you'll find that throughout the course of your life, just as often as you were rejected, you chose not to engage. Plenty of, parties that you could have gone to but chose not to. Plenty of situations or things that made you, issues of social anxiety or whatever, that you chose not to go to these things. Or maybe you just didn't resonate with certain people and you didn't like them, and like part of you was telling you you should go out, you should have fun, you should be a human, you should engage in social activity, and the other part of you, your art, was just telling you just no. Like I don't want to be there. I don't want to do that. And while we're going through our shadow work, it's very easy to look only at the ways in which we were rejected, and to ignore the ways in which we in fact kind of chose this. So there is a sort of back and forth there in both ends. Um, so we went through our lives at this different level because our hearts were trying to push us in a given direction. Our hearts knew that, like, the game that they're playing, I've already graduated that game. Like, I find no interest in that game anymore. And we can see the relatively superficial nature of their relationships or of their perspective on life, let's say. But the real challenge and the real problem and the real pain is that until we go through our awakenings, none of that makes sense. It makes sense from the soul level perspective of, oh, I get it now. Like, I'm a 60-year-old trying to have fun with 20-year-olds. Like, yeah, it's just not going to happen because they don't want to play with, like, they don't want to play with someone who has the perspective that I do, and I can't bring myself down to their level to play with them. Or maybe even a better yet, as opposed to like 20-year-old and 60-year-old. It's sort of like, I think maybe even a better example, I don't know, a 40-year-old trying to play with a 6-year-old. We can't, okay, that makes it sound a little more dismissive of their intellectuality or emotional development or whatever, which I don't mean it that way. I mean it more in terms of like what we have lost or grown out of, which is our inability to play. You know, we can't let go as much as they can because some part of us knows more. Some part of us is pushing us to discover more of ourselves and to do something different. We came into this world with a level 10 understanding of ourselves, of our lives, of the universe, but that level 10 understanding was shrouded behind this veil of illusion that we go through when we incarnate into a body. And it didn't make sense to us. We couldn't possibly understand. So that's why I spent my life pushing aside that version of me and just trying to find my place in the 3D world. And that led to a lot of pain, and it led to a lot of confusion. And ultimately, all that led to me being exactly where I was meant to be at exactly the time that I was meant to be there. Which there are side notes about that I'll talk about in other videos about how I came to be here and how I know that it's exactly where I was meant to be at exactly the time that I was meant to be there. But anyways, so, excuse me, the reason that we have been loners throughout our lives is because our hearts are operating at a different level. Let me try and put this in a different way that doesn't sound, that arrogant. It's not about at a different level. It's in a different direction. You know, everyone is trying to to do certain things in their lives. And younger souls are much more interested in playing the human game, in playing society. They just want to come and live their lives and play in the illusion that they are not souls embodied in human beings. They have more to gain in this lifetime from just operating completely under that veil of illusion. And that's it. And that's what they chose to go through in this lifetime. And that's beautiful in its own way. We have this sense of arrogance from time to time when we go through this spiritual awakening journey of like, I'm better than them or I'm further advanced than them and blah, 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 blah. There's a real beauty to being able to play a game, to really be in it and fully be in it and be so lost in it that you take it all so seriously. There's beauty in that. There's beauty in the ability of a 6-year-old to, play cowboys and Indians and fully believe in that moment that he's a cowboy. It's amazing. And I think that a lot of us, when we look in from the outside and, we wish that we could have friends, a lot of it isn't that. It's actually that we wish we could play. We wish that we could just be in the human body and in the human game the same way that they are. But anyways, they came into this life trying to veer off in that direction. I just want to play the 3D game of human life and this and that. It's like the board game of life. Imagine that at the beginning of the game, and this is actually a great example, so I'm just coming up with now, but so the board game life, I'm sure most of you have played it at some point. And so it starts off at the beginning of the game. There's, a few spaces, and then it kind of splits off into two for a little bit, where there's the university route or the just, regular life kind of route. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it curves for a little bit, and then it comes back together to one board, and it's one thing the whole way through. Now, imagine that when that board split into two, there was actually a secret third path where the first two paths, it makes you think that there's a choice. It makes you think that there's, all of these options of all the different ways that you could live your life by showing you those two possible pathways. And those two possible pathways lead to decisions that are going to impact the rest of your life. And both of those pathways lead to the physical world. Both of those pathways are designed to keep you in the illusion that you are just this human body and that there's nothing more, and to pursuing materialistic gain, or just pursuing, the regular 3D life pleasures, having a job, having a family, having the white picket fence. There's nothing wrong with all of those. There's a huge part of me that wishes that I could just do that. I never asked for this. I did at the soul level perspective, but human Benji never really asked for this. I would have loved to be able to play the human game the same way that others are playing. But that's not me. That's not what I'm here for. So imagine that at the beginning of this game, when that board splits into two, there was actually a secret third path that leads to spirituality. Now, keep in mind that spirituality, I'm not, okay, there is the element of which I'm talking about this from the soul level perspective, that we are all souls in a human body. But even if you don't want to look at things like that, spirituality is beyond a doubt a real thing. There's your mental health, there's your physical health, and there's your mental, physical, and there's your spiritual health. How are you cultivating your energy and your attitudes and your beliefs and, the way that you live your life? That is your spiritual health. And most people that are lost in the 3D game haven't opened up that level of the game. My brother, for example, even he practices meditation, but he does not do it in any sense spiritually. There's no connection there to this. For him, it's this practical, just mind calming, and it's about, starting your day right and about finding some, a moment of peace. And please, again, there's no judgment. There's no better. There's no worse. It's just he's connecting with it, I believe, from a more straightforward human, a practical perspective. He meditates for practical reasons. Whereas people like you and me, I'm guessing you because you're watching this video, oftentimes, like, yeah, we do meditate for practical purposes also, to help us calm ourselves, to help, with shadow work or stuff like that. But a lot of us are doing to help us connect to something that we know is there, but we can't quite identify and we can't quite figure out. So we went off on that secret third path towards spirituality. And here's kind of the secret that we didn't understand that would have helped us so much along the way, that the spiritual path of that board and the materialist or the 3D path of that board run parallel to each other. Or more aptly, they're on top of each other. They're in the exact same space at the exact same time. They it's it's not a different game, it's an extra level of the game. They haven't opened up access to spirituality yet. That is not a level of the game that they have unlocked. Think about it like a video game character, where every level you gain a certain amount of experience points. And once you gain a certain amount of experience points, you can unlock this ability tree. It's like until level 10, your character can only use swords and shields. After level 10, you start developing hand-to-hand combat, or you start developing magic abilities, whatever it is. So at the soul level, we have already developed that stuff. We did it in past lives, or we did it, in the soul realm or whatever. We did it before we came into this world. Or if you just want to look at it from the psychological perspective, we were just wired differently. There were many times in my life where I had this struggle, which I've already kind of alluded to and talked a bit about, but like I knew that I had some deep wisdom to share, and the only way to express that in human terms was for me to use the phrase, like, I know that I am some kind of a genius. But genius is a very practical 3D word, and I don't believe that I'm a genius. Not in the slightest. Not in the way that like Nikola Tesla and Einstein and Stephen Hawking, they are geniuses. I can't wrap my head around, a lot of their perspective, a lot of the ways that they can do their calculations and see things in just whatever. I am not a genius in those terms, but I had something deep down inside of me, and it was just this access to a higher level that I couldn't understand. So this spiritual game that we're playing is right on top of the other game. So it's not actually like, some of us might think that, like, oh, if I'm going down a spiritual path, that must mean that I joined a convent or went to China and joined a monastery kind of thing. That's not it. We chose to live in this sort of 3D world, but pursuing something that was different. Therefore, at the heart level, our goals and our perspective was different from what the other people were doing. And therefore, we didn't feel connected to them in a very direct way. And we had trouble forming bonds with people. For me, it was often because, like I said, I was seeking a deeper connection. And I've found that there were many people throughout my life who would have been willing to call me a friend if I had been able to, how can I put this? I don't want to say it like this, but you understand. Bring myself down to that level. There was one year, for example, I went to a camp, and I felt very much rejected there. I felt very disconnected. Um, Everyone from that camp had been going there for years and years and years, by the way. And it was a very tight-knit community. And it was a very kind of unique camp in my eyes because I'd gone to quite a few camps. Um, so they all shared a very special connection. And I felt very much like an outsider. Um, and what I later learned, because one of my best friend these days, who we don't connect with, we don't really, there's some issues, but I still love him and he will always be my best friend. We still hang out, we still chat, kind of thing. I mean, he lives an hour away, so we hang out once a year, but whatever. So he was from that camp, and he eventually told me, because we had discussions about this, that I wasn't rejected there. The people liked me. And I realized then, maybe he was less accurate than he thought he was, but I believe him that I was not rejected there. And I realized that um, I just didn't feel connected to them. I tried to, I wanted to be, and they might have tried to for me as well, but they couldn't give me the level of connection that I needed in order to know that someone is a friend. And this is something that we realize through our awakenings, that a lot of people that we might have called friends before in our lives weren't really the true close, like stick up for you kind of friends that we thought they were. We start realizing that all these people that we called friends were really just acquaintances at best, because they don't actually care about us. Now, most people are just lost in their lives. They don't care about us because they're too busy with their own shit, and just 99% of people are living that way. That's fine. But I came to realize that I was not as rejected as I thought I was. It was about this disconnection at the energetic and the soul level of, what am I here to do? Where am I trying to go? What is my heart's direction in this life versus what they are trying to do? And like, I would love to just be able to play the human game, but I can't shut off in the way that they can. For example, at camp, we used to always do these like cheers and chants before eating meals and before certain activities and whatever, and it was this big like community building exercise. And while I was there, keep in mind I was like 15, 16 at the time, so still relatively young to be having these outward lens perspectives, this deep introspection about myself. I would watch all of them doing these cheers and getting really into it and jumping up and down. There was a part of me that, like, I desperately wanted to be able to do that, but I just couldn't. I just looked at it, and like it just seemed so weird and so foreign and so like, are you guys serious? Like, are you guys really that excited about lunch or about camp or about whatever? Like, or there was another time, a friend of mine, when I was in CJEP, which in Montreal, it's this thing between high school and university. Um, so this person that I met there, she was in a sorority later on, and she got married to this frat guy, just such a frat guy. Um, and so I went up to their country house one weekend. It was like the one time I was invited to participate in their human social life kind of thing in the same way. Until then, it was like her and I would hang out. It was fine, but like I couldn't connect in the same way they did. But anyways, they invited me to their house for this like frat weekend kind of thing. And I remember we were playing, these drinking games like beer pong, slip and slide kind of thing. Where you'd dive down the slip and slide, and then you need to chug a beer, and then dive down the other way, and then the teammate would come and do it, and it was all this race. And I remember when they were playing this game and competing, they were fucking competing. They were so into it, so amazingly like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. Yes, go, go, go. It was insane. And I like, part of me I wanted to be able to play that, but I couldn't shut off the part of me that was like, are you guys serious? Like, I get it where we're playing, we're having fun, but like, whoa, calm yourselves. Not like, you don't need to calm yourselves, but just like, how are you so into this? How are you taking this so seriously? That is the beauty of their lives. They get to find so much joy in these tiny nonsense things. Now, there's a trade-off there. because that's who they will never in this lifetime, maybe not never, some of them will experience their own awakenings. I'm not making a blanket statement about every person that enjoys frat games and stuff like that. I think you guys understand. But there's a trade-off to being one way or the other. That when you're fully lost in the 3D game, it makes it really easy for you to enjoy those little things. It makes it easy for you to enjoy a game of beer pong and to cheer at camp and to do those little things. It makes it easy also to endure the crappy things. It makes it easier to fall into the rat race of the 9 to 5 work life, or to, you know, allow yourself to be molded by the outside world and to just do whatever comes to you. So you get to appreciate more of what the 3D world has to offer in terms of those simple pleasures. And you also kind of get lost in the game a little more. And then on the other side, we don't get to quite experience those connections. We don't get to quite experience those friendships. We don't get to quite enjoy those little things as much as everyone else does. But we eventually reach this next stage where we get to finally know who we truly are and finally fully connect with ourselves, and will get to live out the rest of our lives with this full sense of fulfillment. And when we die, really be able to die with more peace, with more satisfaction, with having learned and grown more, having been more of service to this world. Anyways, having been more of service to this world and ready to evolve to the next stage of our being in the soul realm or in our next lifetimes, kind of thing. So there's a trade-off to both. And while we're going through it, we would much rather just play the 3D game, and it hurts and it sucks. But once we get through to the other side, I don't think I would trade anything, change anything. The only thing that I can maybe wish I could change is actually who I am at that heart level. Like, I wish that I wish that I weren't me so that I could enjoy that 3D game. That's the only even wish that would make sense. Because without that, if I am me, and I wouldn't trade it. For me, this was exactly what needed to happen to get me to where I needed to go. That's all there is to it. So, one other thing about this is, as we go through this and we feel like we're in pain because we don't have friends. We feel like we're missing out on something. And there is, sort of pain of loneliness that we experience as we go through our lifetimes, feeling this sort of disconnection. But what you have to start realizing is that your pain is not actually about not having friends. It's just not. You can be fully happy 100% not having friends. The real pain is in not understanding yourself. Because if you truly understood yourself, if you truly understood all the things that I've been talking about here today, and who you are at the soul level, and where you're supposed to be going, and what your ultimate destiny is, and why you being different from these other people is not a curse, but as much a gift as it is just a fact, the less that it hurts. Because we understand this now. It's the pain of not having friends really comes because we're desperately trying. We don't understand that we are different. It goes back to that phrase that I said earlier of the most harmful thing that I ever did to myself was not allowing myself to believe that I was different. Now that I allow myself to believe that I'm different and understand how I am different, I can step into that version of myself fully, with confidence, with ease, maybe not ease, but with self-assuredness of like, this is who I am, and to fully be this version of myself, knowing that I don't connect with you guys in the same way, and I am willing to be this person for myself and for all of you. which is rough sometimes. Like I said, I didn't ask for this. I wouldn't necessarily have wanted this from the human perspective. But now that I truly realize who I am, none of that matters. And I recognize it, like, all right, it's been my choices, it's been my path, and I have been doing this because this is what was right for me, and this is what I wanted at the soul level. But at the intellectual level, I didn't understand this. I didn't realize who I was. I didn't realize that inner feeling that I had, that I am here to share something and to do something big, was real. Now that I fully understand it, none of that other stuff matters, and I'm fully happy just being with myself. And do I crave connection? Sure. Am I in pain because I don't have it? No. So that's really the big difference, is that the pain that you think you're in because you don't have friends is not actually about not having friends. It's about not understanding yourself. And this is where all of our real issues fall down to. And this is why we do shadow work, because all of our pain is really stemming from the fact that we don't fully understand ourselves. We are not fully connected to the truth of who we are, and we're under this veil of illusion because of past trauma, and also because of just this whole, soul to body kind of thing. So the more that we remember and wake up and heal and reveal ourselves and step into our mission work and our roles and our true purpose on this earth, the more that we become fully okay with not being connected in the same way. It's, like if a 60-year-old is playing with 20-year-olds and getting offended of, like, why don't these people want to play with me? Well, dude, you're 60 years old. Go be 60. Don't try and party at the club with the 20-year-olds. You're always going to look like a creep. That's all there is to it. So we can't turn off what is inside of us. So we gravitated in this direction in the way that the universe was always pushing us. Like I said, the universe always course corrects. Your heart always knew this, and this is always where you were going to end up. All right. So I really hope that this was helpful. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. If any of this resonated, if any of it made sense, I highly, highly recommend that you check out my book, Feelings First Shadow Work, a simple approach to self-love and emotional mastery. It's going to help you understand all of this stuff. We don't talk about not having friends specifically, but what we talked about in this video was about how the pain of not having friends is actually about the pain of not understanding yourself. And this book is going to help you understand yourself and the universe in a way that's going to unlock that higher knowledge where you're going to be able to be okay with with who you are and with the path that you've been on. And the more that you do that shadow work and the more that you learn how to master yourself, the more that you will then step into the full version of yourself. This version of me that I'm here now, finally being able to talk to you guys and to know and understand without arrogance and without ego that I have wisdom for people to learn from. That's okay. I can acknowledge and recognize that and step into that role without thinking that I'm better or smarter than anyone or anything else. This is just, I finally know and accept and embody who I am. This is who I am. This is who I came to be, and I'm not ashamed of that anymore. And now that I know that, everything else makes sense and falls into place. So, you absolutely want to get that book, Feelings First Shadow Work. You can find it on Amazon. Just search Feelings First Shadow Work with my name, and I'm sure you'll find it. If you don't, send me a message. I'll let you know. That's if you want the paperback or the Kindle version. If you prefer an ebook or an audiobook, you can go to my website. I'll put a link below. There's a short form link, which is benjisharercoaching.com/ffbook. But I'll put a link in the description below. And when you buy it through my website specifically, you'll also get a couple of bonuses. There are 10 guided meditations to help you with your shadow work, and there's 5 high-powered manifestation tracks to help you get into the vibration of things that you're trying to attract and stuff like that. And yeah, you'll get access to a few things as well. So thank you so much for joining me. absolutely check out that book. I promise you it's going to open so much up. Okay? Thank you for joining me. Thank you to the person that asked this question, and I truly hope that this was helpful for all of you. Well, much love. Have a great day. Benji Scherer, signing off.